Hey everyone, this is Finn, and in this tutorial I'm going to be going over some C# programming basics with you. We are going to talk about if statements, parameters, and loops. I am going to demonstrate these different things for you using simple print functions to the console, like we did with the Hello World exercise. But you can apply it to many different things that are not just printing messages to the console. First, let's select our main camera. Make sure that you're selecting the main camera object in the hierarchy. Go to the inspector, go down to add component, and click that button. And we are going to type if statements, etc. New script. You can name it whatever you want. That's just what I am going to name it. Now we are going to click on the three dots at the top right of the component for the script. Go down to edit script, and now this is going to open up our code editor. Now that we have our script open, I'm going to start by declaring a variable. I am going to make sure that my cursor is placed underneath the public class, and I'm going to start typing public because I want this variable to be a public variable that is accessible through the inspector in Unity. I will show you that when we test our scene. Public int, and I'm going to name it I, and that'll stand for int to be our example. And to start, I'm going to set I equals 1, and then put a semicolon at the end. Now that I is going to equal 1, and to verify that, we are going to create an if statement that says if, and that's how we start an if statement. Then we open up and close parentheses. Inside of those parentheses, we are going to type our condition. If I is equal to 1, which it is, then make sure that you open up your squiggly brackets, press enter, and it's going to move those two down to open up this container here. Make sure your cursor is inside of there. Now we are going to create our print statement, print, and then in double quotations we are going to type our string, which is going to say I equals 1, and we are going to end that with a semicolon. Press Ctrl S to save your script. Now at the very start, if I is equal to 1, which it will be because at the very beginning we set, right before that, I to 1, then it is going to print I equals 1. And just to demonstrate that it won't automatically print that regardless of our if statement, I am going to type another that says if I equals 2, open up that if statement with squiggly brackets, then print I equals 2, which we know it's not going to because I does not equal 2, it equals 1. Let's save our script and go back to our Unity test scene. Wait for it to load for a moment, and if you see, I is set to 0 by default. Since our script has not become active, this start function has not been called, but it will the moment we press play. So watch this I variable go from 0 to 1, and then we should get a print statement in our console that says I equals 1. We should not be getting the print statement that says I equals 2. Let's try. There we go. As you can see, I equals 1. and it gave us a print statement that says I equals 1. Now, let's go back to our code. I am going to take these two sets of if statements, and I am going to make them their own method, because we don't like a lot of loose code in the start function. We like to keep everything nice and tidy in their own method. That is just the best practice. And for this, I am going to call it void if statement example. Make sure you have your opening and closing quotations, and then your opening and closing squiggly brackets. And now I'm going to click and drag to select everything except for where it says I equals 1, because we want that to stay there. I'm going to press Control X to cut, and then I'm going to press Control V while placing my cursor inside of this if statement example method, and it is going to put that information inside of this method so we can call to the method instead of having all of that code there taking its place. If statement example. Now I call to that function right after I is set to 1. So we should get the same results, because that is the same as putting that code in the start function itself. So let's verify that the same thing happens. Let's save our code and go back to Unity. I'm going to clear my console. Make sure you are watching the I variable and the console. There we go, and you see the same thing happens. Of course, the I changes to 1 because that is still in the same place as it was before, but I equals 1 still occurs because right after we call that function. Let's press clear on our console and go back to our code. Now I'm going to comment that out of the start function because we do not want that to be called anymore. But we have that right here. That is not going anywhere, and if we need to refer to it, we can. I am going to place a function right before that if statement example, and I am going to call it void hello world. Now, I bet you're wondering, why did I name it Hello World? That's because we are going to do the same thing that we do in our Hello World example. We are going to create a print statement that says Hello World, but this time we're going to do it in a different way. Make sure that you click your cursor in between these two opening and closing parentheses, and we are going to type something called parameters. You've seen parameters before, specifically when we use an on collision enter function. I'll type that there so you can see it real quick. It calls a variable of the data type collision, and it names that variable collision. This is another way to declare a variable, but what it does practically is when Unity detects a collision, it passes through that collision object through these parameters, and then when you reference collision, that's how it knows what collision you're talking about when you write code inside of here. That might sound a little confusing, so let's use my example to wrap our brains around that concept. Let's create another variable right under our public int I, and I'm going to call it public string hello. And then in the start function, right after the line that says I equals 1, we are going to type hello equals, and in surrounded in quotations, because that is how we present a string, we are going to type hello world, and then end it with a semicolon. Now we have this variable called hello. I'm going to put a comment next to it and say hello will mean the same thing as placing hello world in its place. If we want to type a print statement and call it print, the parameter that you always put through this method is usually in the form of a string. This is also a form of passing a parameter through a method. We are going to first start in the start function, but I'm going to show you how to pass this variable through to the hello world function. So let's, instead of typing hello world like we did in the hello world tutorial, let's just type hello, which represents hello world, typed just like this. And so let's press Control S, go back to our scene, and when I press play, it is going to tell me hello world in the print in the console. There we go, we've got hello world. I'll press play to exit play mode and go back to my code. Now I am going to get rid of that. I'm going to delete that line of code. Let's go back to our hello world method that we created earlier. And let's declare parameters inside of these two parentheses. To do that, I'm going to type the data type that we want the variable to be. In this case, we want it to be a string, and we want it to be called something that we haven't already named a variable, so I'm going to call it greeting. This is not automatically connected to our hello variable over here, but I will show you how we are going to pass the hello variable through when we call the hello world method, just like we pass hello world as a string or the hello variable through that print statement. Let's type print, and in parentheses, instead of hello, we are going to type greeting to reference this newly made variable that is only reachable in the scope of this method. This greeting variable only exists inside of here. If I try to reference it in update, greeting, it's not going to say anything. If I try to reference hello, it will, because it is a public string that is named at the top of our public class instead of inside of a specific method. Now that we've set it up like this, it's not going to do anything because greeting is going to come up null. There is no greeting as of right now. Let's change that. Let's call in our start function to our hello world method like this, hello world, and then add our parentheses and a semicolon at the end. And inside, we are going to want to pass through this hello variable, and we are going to do just that, say hello. What that does is when hello world is called, hello gets passed through to this method and it becomes greeting. The value of hello, which is hello world, becomes stored inside of this variable called greeting, and then we use that variable called greeting inside of our print statement. Let's press Control S to save. Go back to our Unity project. I'm going to clear our console, but you are going to see that it gives us the hello world greeting in our console, just like before. We just wrote our code in a different, more flexible way that would allow us to pass different messages through if we wanted to. press play. Notice how the variable, since it's a public string, we can see it inside of the if statements, etc. script component. It says hello world, and now hello world is being printed in our console because of our new hello world method. If I wanted to change hello to a different greeting, I'm going to keep it a greeting because greetings are nice, and also because I have named this variable greeting as a parameter in the hello world method. So to be consistent, I'm just going to make another greeting. What's up? Press Control S to save, and now hello is equal to what's up. Passing hello through to the hello world method is going to print that string. Let's go back. I'm going to press clear. Let's press play. And now we see that we get a print statement that says what's up, and then our hello variable is valued at what's up. Keep in mind that we don't have to only call a variable to pass through this hello world method. We can also just type whatever we want. I'm going to call to hello world again. This time in parentheses, I'm going to create a new string. I'm going to say, how is everyone doing? Now, after we print hello world, or excuse me, in this case, what's up, I'm going to change it back to hello world. First, we are going to use hello, which now means hello world. We are going to see hello world get printed in the console, and then the method hello world is going to be called, but instead we're passing through this string, how is everyone doing? Let's save and test our scene. And there you have it. Hello world, how is everyone doing? I'm going to delete the last call to hello world that I made. Then I am going to comment out this hello world, the first hello world call that we do as well. Press Control S. Now above the hello world method, we are going to create a new method called void for loop. And I'm going to talk to you about for loops now. A loop is a way to have a piece of code running a specific amount of times. So a loop would cause a piece of code to run over and over and over again a set amount of times. I'm going to type for to start it, and then open up and have close parentheses. Inside of there, we are going to have 3 steps. The first step is instantiating or declaring a variable that is going to hold the counter for your for loop. Let's say int c equals 0, and that is going to set it at 0 to start with. Put a semicolon. You want to make sure that you aren't missing semicolons when I type semicolons. So after that semicolon, type c is less than or equal to 10. What that means is we are going to have this loop run until c is greater than 10. Right now, our loop is going to run as long as c is less than or equal to 10. So right now, at the beginning, c is 0. That means we are going to get 11 different loops because we're going to start from 0, go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. To increase the value of c there, because I'm sure you've asked yourself, well, we say c equals 0, and then we say this loop runs until c is greater than 10. It will run as long as it is less than or equal to 10. So what causes c to become greater than 10? That is the last part of the loop, and we are going to put c plus plus. That is also the name of a programming language, but I don't want you to get it confused. That has nothing to do with that programming language. C++ just means you're taking the value of c, which is an integer, and increasing it by 1. It is the same as typing c plus equals 1. It is adding to the c value by 1 each time we return from a loop. So I'm going to keep it as c++, and then I am going to open and close these squiggly brackets, press enter to move them down, and now we have a nice little container for our for loop. And to demonstrate what is happening, I am going to create a simple print statement. Make sure that you are typing print, and then in those parentheses, c, to reference our c integer variable. Now press Ctrl S. Now that we've put our print statement inside of our loop, we want to call to this function so that it happens during the start function. I am going to click and add it underneath the other commented out calls to different functions we've created, and I'm going to say for loop, add opening and closing parentheses, and then add a semicolon. Now I'm going to press Ctrl S. As soon as we press play, that is going to start our scene, and we are going to see that loop appear in our console. I'm going to press play now. I'm going to press play again to exit play mode, and now we can see in our console that we have 11 different messages, each telling us the value of c. We've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to press clear, and to give you another quick demonstration about parameters, I am going to, instead of saying print c, I am going to call to our hello world method right there. I'm going to say hello world because basically, other than the fact that we named it hello world and that we called our string greeting, we don't need to make it a greeting. We can pass any string we want to this through this method. So what we are going to do is type hello world, and in parentheses type c, and since c is not a string, we need to convert it to a string by typing dot to string with parentheses opening and closing afterwards. Then end your line with a semicolon. The reason why you need to make sure you have toString is because we specified the variable that you need to pass through this method as a string. So c, since it is an integer, we need to say c dot toString to be able to pass that through. Now I'm going to press Ctrl S. We still have our call in the start function, and when I test this scene, you will be able to see our for loop still work, even though I am passing it through our hello world method instead. There we go. The same thing happens. 0, 1, 2, all the way to 10. I'm going to press clear, and then go back to our script. And that takes us to the end of our introduction to if statements, parameters, and loops. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.